Organized religion is the longest running con in all of human history. It has always been about money somewhere, and the conversion tactics only exist to make more members who can give them cash. We would never accept this in any other endeavor, so why do we do it with religion? I don't know, let's go find out. This time out, Tim Barnett over at Red Pen Logic is going to explain why churches want your money. Basically, he's just admitting to the con, although not in so many words. This is not going to work out well for him, I predict, but let's go take a look and see. Because he gets really animated here, which I figure indicates that he's just trying to run defense for the con, and it is a con. Always has been, and always will be. So let's get to it.
We often hear about how churches want your money. Well, they do, and here's why.
Now, I know that he's going to give the standard answers here, and some of them are true, but then we can just point out all the reasons why it just doesn't work. I'll get into that in a second, I'm sure. I've said this before, but if I had to respect any preacher, it would be the one that holds down a regular full-time job, has a Sunday service where he preaches, doesn't pass around a collection plate, and he funds his ministry completely in other ways and just wants to share the gospel with all comers. It's still irrational, but at least he's not trying to make a career out of it. He is doing something useful 5 days a week. And that's not what Tim is doing. So by all means, keep going. Let's see what you got.
This is Red Pen Logic with Mr. B, where we help you assess bad thinking by using good thinking, and we try to have some fun while we're doing it.
Too bad you have no good thinking then, isn't it? Yes, that is a value judgment, but it's why I don't care about what anyone says. I care about what they can demonstrate with objective evidence, and I don't think that I've ever seen an apologist that can demonstrate anything demonstrably factually true about their religious beliefs. So stop with the build-up and actually say what you want to say, because I'm pretty sure we won't be impressed, and I don't even know what it will be yet.
In today's tweet, Nathan makes an accusation that all churches care about is money. He says, all churches are after one thing, your money, nothing else. It's a business just like any other business.
And he's right. It operates just as any other business operates. It's got a product to sell, a hard sell method with supposed rewards for buying in, and detriments if you decide to walk on by, and they want your money so they can keep the doors open and keep the same spiel going week after week after week. That's a business. That's how business works. Now, I'm sure Tim is going to try to spin it another way, so let's watch.
Now here are some thoughts you can take to the bank. First, how does Nathan know what all churches are after?
Because if they weren't after that, they just close their doors. All businesses need funding. If they don't get it, then they go out of business, which we're seeing a lot of these days, aren't we? Churches are closing their doors left and right across the country because they can't attract enough paying customers through those doors. This is where churches could actually do something useful if they just stop passing the collection plate and rely on God to provide. If they got that funding entirely out of the blue with no human support whatsoever, then that would lend at least some credence to their claims, right? But not one church anywhere does that. Funny how that works.
How many churches has he been in? I've been in hundreds of churches, and here's what I've seen. In virtually every case, I've seen churches sacrificially serving the overwhelming needs of their communities.
And how do they get the money to do that? Because it doesn't come about by magic. In fact, even the supposed charitable works of churches, that's often just a loss leader as a way to try to convert others to their faith. They're just selling the religion. They'd really like to get some whales, but mostly the only people who are likely to fall for it are the poor and downtrodden. Churches really want a bunch of blue-haired biddies in the pews who are willing to hand over their pension checks to the Lord because they're terrified of dying, and the religion lies to make them feel better. As I said, until you can come up with churches that are not asking for anybody's money, and I mean anybody's, I'm just not impressed.
They're serving through counseling services and substance abuse programs, food banks and summer camps, marriage seminars, and community service programs.
All of which serves to reinforce their religious beliefs on others. It's to get people back into church and giving them money. Now, way back when I was young, I went to all religious schools all the way through high school. My high school, it was not cheap, although by today's standards, probably it was, but back in the early 80s, it was thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars a year. The only way you could get a discount, and not a huge one at that, was to be an active member at one of the supporting churches, which we were. In order to be an active member, you had to attend regularly, you had to give money to the church, and you had to do some other things. And I don't remember the exact details right now because it's been a very long time, but every time something needed to be done around the church, members would show up in droves, conveniently all the parents of a high school age student, and provide free labor. They didn't pay for anything. Parishioners were out there pulling weeds. I remember I was there with my father one weekend installing a full playground once. If you owned a company that they could use, then they used you. They played on your faith and your desires to knock a 0 or 2 off the high school tuition. I have seen this happen personally, and it is not at all uncommon, at least back then. I don't know how it works today, but back then, this was everywhere. So, yeah, still not impressed.
They help women with crisis pregnancies. They help stop sex trafficking. They pay for overseas programs that are bringing food, water, and education to terribly impoverished people.
In exchange for the ability to preach. Now, look at secular charities who don't do that. They are only there to help the people. They're not trying to change their minds. They're not trying to convert them to anything. They are just there to help. Because the religious charities, they're only there to convert people. They're only there to change minds. As I've said before, I had 2 super Christian missionaries in the family, and that's all they talked about. How many souls they were winning to Christ, and how much it costs to go to all these countries and provide these services. Now, I'm perfectly fine with helping people, but helping people in exchange for conversion, or as a means to get conversion, that's absolutely wrong. That's having an ulterior motive for your actions, and that's exactly what the religious do. All paid for by the idiots in the pews back home. Tim is not going to bring that part up, is he? Wonder why?
Not to mention providing Christians with a place to worship and fellowship and receive spiritual mentorship.
They ignore Matthew 18:19 through 20 then, where it says that wherever 2 or 3 are gathered, God is among them. You don't have to go to a big church with an expensive sound system to hear a windbag reading out of a book that you could just as easily read for yourself. No, these churches are not for the people. They are for the clergy. It's a place to get all their marks together in one place so that they can scam them all at once. It's done out of guilt, not necessity. They just want your money. They need your money because keeping a big place like that open to the public is an expensive venture. Again, I'm not as hard on the preachers who have a couple people over and hold a service in their own living room, but as the venue gets bigger and bigger and the fees get higher and higher, it just starts to look ridiculously hypocritical, doesn't it?
And they do it all for free.
No, they don't. Now, they may or may not charge people for the individual services. I've definitely seen people who did. I went to another church with a friend once, and to get married in that church, there was a mandatory set of classes that you had to take with the pastor, and they sure weren't free, and they sure weren't cheap. To get your kid baptized, there were classes that you and the godparents had to take, and it cost money. Now, I don't know how common that is because I didn't run around looking at all the local churches, but since the point of all this is to keep people coming in on Sunday morning, and the point of that is to extract the contents of your wallet into the collection plate, some of the lost leaders, they're looking mighty suspicious, aren't they?
Did you get that? For free.
Bullshit.
Now, how can they give away so many valuable resources for free? Easy. Other people pay.
And he admits it, because if everyone pays, it's not free, is it? Because the definition of free is without cost or payment. If you're getting paid, no matter who pays it, then it's not free. Even if it's voluntary, it's not free. Now, am I upset at that? No, so long as the payment isn't coerced, which in this case it absolutely is. And we look at it as what it is, a business transaction. This is not money freely given because there are implied or stated threats that keep people opening their wallets. Tons of churches demand 10% of your income just for you having the privilege of sitting in the pews. Even the ones that don't, most demand some kind of financial support, even if the number isn't specified. And in the case of my church, they were getting free gardening, free labor, yada, yada, yada. They would put on pretty regular car washes where the kids were expected to go out there and clean cars, and all of that money went right back into the church coffers. Just saying, do it because you love God, that doesn't change where the money goes, does it?
Other people give. So do churches want your money? Sure, but it's not because they're trying to get rich. They're not.
Tell that to the megachurch pastors. Yes, that is an extreme example, but it happens nonetheless. And even for my old church, the lead pastor was not poor by any means. He and his wife, they both drove Mercedes. They lived in a house that was fully funded by the church. He and his wife couldn't figure out what made babies because she was constantly pregnant, and they kept asking for more money to support their ridiculous brood. I think there were like 6 or 7 when I left. Now, was he a crook? Probably not. I think he was a pretty nice guy, although I didn't recognize a lot of things until I was out of the religious echo chamber. I probably wouldn't say the same thing today. He was just trying to make a buck, even if he didn't see it that way. Nothing he did was charity. He was just out there looking out for number one.
It's because they want to serve people. Now, are there some bad apples out there? Yeah.
You want to receive your money tonight in Jesus' name. Oh!
God said, tell her if she'll plant a seed equal to her house note, I'll give her a house debt-free.
That's some of what I was talking about, but those are some pretty obvious extreme examples. The same thing happens in virtually every church in the land, though. He's just not going to talk about the regular churches who are being just a little more discreet. Because here's the thing, if you didn't know, church services are specifically designed to encourage people to give more money. The music, the layout, the collection plates go around right after the sermon. It's all psychologically designed to increase their take. Is that as obvious as what the clear con men are doing? No, probably not, but it's still a con nonetheless.
And those churches characteristically have a twisted gospel message that's easy to spot.
And they say the same about you, because this is where we tend to have problems that people like Tim don't want to recognize. It gets us right back to the 45,000 distinct sects of Christianity, all supremely convinced that their reading of the Bible is the right one and everyone else is wrong. When you start to say, your way is wrong, but my way is right, prove it. Go right ahead. Show us that there is a demonstrably correct reading of your big book of multiple choice. They can't do it. This is just, it sounds good to me, which means absolutely nothing. And I'm sorry, but I've seen tons of churches trying to skim their parishioners off of other churches, trying to get them to come to theirs because they want that money. They might not spin it that way, even to themselves, but that's really what's going on.
You give me your money, so God will give you money. But most churches, like the ones in my neighborhood and your neighborhood, aren't like that. I mean, drop by a few of them and see for yourself.
Oh, I bet there probably are. That's why he points to the extremes, so he can just say, see, we're not that bad. Sorry, but not that bad doesn't mean good. It just means that you can come up with worse examples, but those worse examples are usually rolling in the dough, and I'm sure there's a lot of pastors in those not that bad churches who would trade places in a second if they thought they could get away with it. Money is a very powerful motivator. Just denying it doesn't make it untrue.
Second, every organization requires money to survive, and that includes churches.
Which is why they are businesses. Again, if God actually backed any of this, if God actually existed, why wouldn't we expect churches to just magically have their bank accounts topped off on a regular basis? I mean, other than the fact that no gods demonstrably exist. Why would a church, which purports to speak for God, need my $20 in the collection plate every week? Don't they have a direct line to God? Shouldn't God want to help them save souls? But no, that would make sense, wouldn't it? It would actually show where churches were the true religion and which ones weren't, right? But since none of them are demonstrably supported by any gods, maybe we can just assume that they're all scams because that's what they are. Maybe we should just tax these idiots. I think that's a really good idea.
This is just common sense. Churches have bills just like you do. Rent or mortgage, electricity bill, phone bills, internet fees, postage, and payroll, and on it goes.
We know, which is why they're businesses. The very definition of a business is an organization or enterprising entity engaged in commercial, industrial, or professional activity. Churches are in the business of selling an ideology in exchange for money. That's what a business is. Churches are engaged in so-called charitable works, which, let's be honest, they're not really charitable since they're just a loss leader for pushing their message on others. But they engage in that solely so that they can make money from donations or the hopes that people are going to join their church and donate directly. This is the part that the religious can't get through their heads. They can't be honest about this. They think they're special, but they're not. They are doing the exact same thing that every other business out there is doing it, just putting their own little spin on it and pretending that makes it all different. It just doesn't, though. Tim is an idiot. But hey, what else is new, right?
This is how life works for everyone, and you know it because that's how it works for you too.
Which means that you are not special. Tim is all over the place here, isn't he? He says the church isn't a business, then he shows that it is a business, then he says, well, it's just like everything else, which I've been saying from the very beginning, but I have no clue what he's really on about anymore. So why does he think that churches deserve to be tax exempt? Because I assume that he agrees with that. Maybe I'm wrong, but I'm going to assume that he agrees with that. If they're just businesses, then why don't we treat them like businesses? If they're doing actual charitable work, not just lost leaders to gain new members, then sure, give them a tax break on that, on the actual charitable work that they do, just like we do with every other charitable organization out there. But not paying your fair share for everything else? Yeah, screw you, Tim. But I guess we're getting off track a little bit, so let's get back to the video.
Third, we all spend money without complaint on the things we value. Every time you buy something on Amazon or give something to charity, you get something for yourself or you do something for someone else. They both cost you money.
Sure, but Amazon isn't telling me that if I don't place an order, I'm going to fry forever in a lake of fire. That's the threat, implicit or explicit, from religion. Hey, that's a really nice soul you've got there. It would be a shame if something bad happened to it. This is the con that religion has been engaged in forever. And it isn't like they can show that you have a soul to begin with, or that there's anything that happens to you after death. That's the lie that makes them money. But they won't acknowledge it because they're scam artists. Every last one of them.
You value the new iPhone, so you give money to Apple. You value feeding the hungry, so you give money to your local food bank. Helping others both physically and spiritually is especially important to Christians. That's why Christians ask for help and why Christians give it.
Mostly, they don't though, not directly anyhow. Instead, they give money to the church. Most of that goes to building upkeep, paying salaries, stuff like that. That's the business side of it. And there aren't any other businesses out there that are tax exempt for the business side. You're not doing the Lord's work by having the carpets cleaned. Then there's the pseudo-charitable side, which a lot of it is just a sham, pushing your ideology on others. And if they do run a soup kitchen, say, it's only being done so that they can take the poor and destitute and try to convert them to Christ along the way. They really don't care about helping others. They don't care about putting food in your belly, at least not for its own sake. It's a sales campaign. They do it so that these people can join their churches, or, and this is the insidious part, so that they can claim that their religion is the biggest religion around, and therefore they get to impose their religious ideas on others through political and social pressure. Don't think we didn't see that one happening. It would be one thing if individual Christians or groups of Christians went out and did good works on their own and with their own money without propping up these churches, but that's not how the overwhelming majority work, is it?
Nathan may not care about spiritual stuff. Fair enough. But that doesn't mean there's something wrong with it, and it certainly doesn't mean that churches are just in it for the money.
Mostly they are, though, and we can point to tons of them where that is demonstrably true. Granted, Tim would probably say, but that's not us. But there are still tons of Christian churches out there that do it, though, aren't there? Prosperity gospel is a thing, remember? He had a video on some of those crooks earlier on, but here's the thing. I think a lot of pastors, especially among the Catholics and groups like that, who are just being taken advantage of. Those are the ones who are funneling money up the chain to the larger organization unknowingly. The Vatican, according to best guesses since they don't have to open their books, it's worth somewhere between $10 and $15 billion. The Vatican has big investments in banking, insurance, chemicals, steel, construction, and real estate, just to name a few. They are a business. They are in it for the money, and they are not alone. If Tim wants to talk about his individual church, fine, whatever. I'm not going to argue with that, but religion as a whole is the biggest scam that this planet has ever seen. At last count, the Southern Baptist Convention, which is close to what Tim is talking about, has 47,198 churches. That's an awful lot of people living off the grift, isn't it? Now, Tim doesn't think that it's a grift, and certainly many of those pastors take it seriously, but that doesn't change the fact that they are selling unsubstantiated stories to the general public for a buck. It's really hard to get away from that, isn't it?
I haven't said anything profound here. We all understand that every organization, Christian or not, needs money to function. And we all understand that everyone, Christian or not, is glad and even honored to give money to the things they value. Even atheist YouTubers have Patreon accounts.
But here's the thing. None of those other businesses are pretending to be the mouthpieces for an all-powerful God that should, if any of those stories were true, be able to keep them solvent all on his own. Yet how many churches go out of business every single year? It's hard to say definitively, so we'll just pick the first hit on Google, the Assemblies of God, which says that every year an average of 1,000 churches start up and 4,000 churches close. That is not healthy. And as a group that pretends that God will provide, that says a lot of really unflattering things about their beliefs, right? According to Christianity Today, last year, Southern Baptists lost 500,000 members, the largest decline in more than a century. Is it any wonder that they're out there trying to get more members? Because their denomination is dying. They are having a monumental decline over the last decade or so, and it's just getting worse every single year. I don't necessarily begrudge them having membership rallies, but should those things be tax exempt? No. Hell no. Last weekend, at least as I write this, we were out of town and we drove past a number of churches on Sunday morning where services were going on. Every single one of them, except one, the parking lot was nearly empty. The only one that we passed where they were full, I mean, they even had signs out that the parking lot was full, was a Korean Christian church. Maybe they're doing okay? I don't know. I don't have one locally where I can keep an eye on them, but the rest, they're all just ghost towns.
Welcome to the Patreon page for the Atheist Experience.
Even atheists ask for money.
What do you get for donating? Well, you get a warm, fuzzy feeling for helping us continue to do what we've been doing and reach more people.
And why shouldn't they? I wouldn't just assume that atheists are in it for the money and nothing else.
I couldn't say. However, there are a ton of people on YouTube who are only in it for the money. They want to quit their job so they can just make videos from home in their pajamas or whatever. Okay, most of them do fail, but sure, okay, I guess. They still don't have an imaginary friend in the clouds on their side who should have no problem at all keeping them going, do they? And that's really the thing. Churches were just YouTube before YouTube was a thing. People who wanted easy jobs so they didn't have to go out and dig ditches. They just wanted to tell people stories. They didn't care if it was true. They just wanted to appeal to people's emotions. Authors, they do the same thing, but at least there, they don't pretend that any of it is true, and the vast majority of them have day jobs to pay the bills. It just depends on how honest you want to be about it, and Tim and honesty, yeah, not so much. Then he goes into asking for money, which is where we're just going to stop, because I don't let anybody advertise here, ever. That's why my channel has never been and will never be monetized. I'm not going to make you watch ads. I don't know if YouTube puts ads on them anyway, because I've got an ad blocker and I recommend everybody else has one as well, but I'm not going to do it because I'm not an ass. I am never going to have a join button. I do have a couple of options if people want to donate, but I virtually never bring them up, and I get virtually nothing from them. This is done for free because I want to do it, not because I want to make a buck. That's the way I work. It's the way I've always worked. I am never going to change how I work because I am an honest individual. Now, sure, it's great to see people caring, but I'm not here to pass a collection plate. I'm here to give my views, and anybody who wants to watch it, they're welcome to do so. Anybody who doesn't want to, hey, no harm, no foul. Go find a channel that you enjoy. I don't care. I don't pander to anyone, and I never will. Take it or leave it. This is what I'm putting out there. Consume it or don't. Yet, that's not what most churches do, right? Most successful churches, anyhow. The really extreme ones that meet in a strip mall and have only a couple of hardcore members, those are the fanatics, and I don't do fanaticism around here. We laugh at it, but that's about it. Most churches out there are trying to appeal to the widest number of people that they can so they can maximize their take. I don't know that that's something they should be proud of, but that is what they do. They should be asking themselves a whole lot of questions, and they're not, because, as we know, they don't really care. They just want to believe. All Tim has done here is prove that churches are a business, doing what businesses do, and they probably shouldn't have a tax exemption. Now, we shouldn't charge for things that are demonstrable actual charity, those things with absolutely no profit motive or membership drive involved, but otherwise, they should be paying taxes like everybody else. The latest revenue statistics, and we don't even really know how accurate it is, but as of February 3rd, 2024, churches make about, because they don't have to report their income, about $378 billion a year. Now that's a lot of revenue that we're missing out on, right? The vast majority of that just stays in the church. Although again, there's no way to know for sure exactly how much, because churches don't have to open their books to anyone, including the IRS. Does anyone think that this is reasonable? I certainly don't, but let me know your thoughts down in the comments. All Tim has done is shown that churches aren't special. Well, we already knew that. So why do they get special treatment? I don't know, and I don't know that we'll ever really understand, because humanity as a group is just stupid.